Okay. So is it fair to assume that the other persons do feel some degree of compulsion to check their social media? How many of you check your social media within half an hour to an hour of waking up on a morning? I understand compulsion, but you do it. Yes.
Right. The studies have shown that 90% of Americans, let's use America as the largest consumer base for social media. 90% of Americans check their social media within the first 15 minutes of waking up every day. 90% of 298 million people check their social media within the first 15 minutes before they have breakfast, before they've gone to the bathroom, before they even kiss their wives, kiss their husbands, partners. They check their social media every day. That is a disturbing trend, and it shows that you are indeed hooked on the product.
That the influence economy is that one where people are doing things for grand and stuff like that. But yet, the people who are liking and trying to be like them, I'm sorry that the panelist from the Kim Jones isn't here because she can speak to what the young people and as a great associate, what the young people in our school system are facing now with regards to trying to do things for the ground and to try to now if you can understand the 1.6 billion users and 4.2 billion likes, but you're trying to be in the top 1%. So you're trying to get up to getting a million or so likes every day. So every young person there wants to be next influencer. But when you're paying bots in China to produce those likes for you, then you can't ever be clear. So people are trying to be the next influencer and facing the challenge where they're doing things that would not necessarily be within them to be outlandish, to create a movement towards themselves when other people are paying a computer basically to generate likes.
So that's where Facebook makes the money.
They
So,
sell your data. They sell your data. They sell your algorithm. They sell what you like, what you're interested in. Cambridge Analytica was famous for this. They use the quizzes. Every day there'll be a new quiz. Somebody will sign up a quiz. Tell me what James Bond character you most represent, or what car would you be, and you start putting in all this information about yourself, and start giving and collating all of their data fields, and then they just sell it to people that need the information. Go ahead.
yeah, so in terms of advertising, have any of you ever ran a Facebook ad campaign?
Yeah.
Right. So you're aware that you can essentially segment who you want to target for your ad by demographic,
Yeah.
but you can get extremely granular. Cambridge Analytica was able to essentially get at a bunch of underlying data that allowed them to, within a very high degree of accuracy, determine what people's political views were in election, and who were also persuadable to certain different types of messaging. And then they essentially directed those messages, the people who were able to direct those messages for people who were persuadable to a certain ideology, direct messaging to those persons. So for the persons who thought that the government was inherently corrupt, and those persons were easily susceptible to conspiracy theory information. Those persons would read it, believe it, forward it on. So the combination of the information allowing you to target people plus the ability to very quickly send you information that you're going to believe and you're going to share allowed essentially any messaging they wanted to be viral. And people would see it, pass it on, believe it. And then what would be added to it is the addition of bots, which would seed, and sometimes seed information, and sometimes reshare information. And you, being the person receiving it, don't know if it's coming from a bot or coming from someone. It's just in your news feed.
It will turn up as a sponsored ad.
Yes.
This random sponsored ad with or a shared video that Mark sponsored. Read this now, and
so the question becomes, or the questions arise. One, what does the power of social media platforms mean for democracy going forward? I saw a term that referred to I think it was the downscaling of humanity, and it essentially said that human beings still have essentially caveman ethics but godlike technology. How do we ensure that we remain in control of the platforms, the technologies, and getting back to the addiction? More and more we're getting to the point where I personally sometimes, if I wake up in the middle of the night and can't sleep, I might automatically reach for my cell phone. And sometimes I literally have to pull my hand away, and then I will lay down there
fighting, trying not to take up your cell phone.
Yeah.
I solved that by putting my cell phone in the front house. So my cell phone charges in the front house, and I sleep. I ain't getting up on my bed at 2 o'clock in the morning to go and get my cell phone. That's just ridiculous. But I used to sleep with my cell phone next to me on my pillow, with my laptop plugged in next to me on my pillow. So I could either turn on my laptop or turn on my cell phone and scroll and lose an hour of my life to YouTube or to...
It seems then that the social media is a better way to go as far as advertising things and not rely on
traditional media
print,
has its
traditional media.
Print media will get it. Print media will get the customers that you want. If your target market requires you to, if your target market is people over the age of 50, then you can run print media ads, because majority of them are still buying newspapers every day. Still reading. Well, okay, they read. You don't buy a newspaper every day? No, but you buy a newspaper though.
I'm minority.
You're an old lad, and you don't come. My mother's maybe.
Perhaps that's why
my mother's going to be 70. My mother's going to be 70 next year. My mother makes me buy both newspapers every day, and if she don't get one, there's a problem in the house.
Part of that is tradition.
Yeah,
I read my newspaper online every day, except Sunday.
you buy a Sunday paper.
Grew up, and the Sunday paper is
Buy-
part of
breakfast.
a culture, a tradition that I know. My sons will do it, and I don't have to do it either. I recognize that I can read my paper online on Sunday as well.
Yeah.
But I walk to hold it in my hand at the table and whatever, and flip the pages.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. As a advertising man and a multimedia practitioner, I want to speak to the newspaper scenario. Newspapers are, for want of a better way of putting it, print is not going to die within the next 50 years. But in the next 200 years, you're going to have what we call smart paper, which you'll have a film of paper that is printed, but it's printed digitally because of the information sent to it from the newspaper servers. So newspapers are not going to die. They're going to eventually transform. That's the think tank that that we had gone to back in the States in the early 2000. As to the demographic, we are seeing a change again. The demographic used to be people above the age of 50 to 70 still buying papers. But now you're getting what we call multimedia fatigue. So in multimedia fatigue, the paradigm now is changing back to where you're having people under the age of 30 buying print media. They're buying print media. They want vinyl records. Sales of Pioneer 1200 decks are going up. And a Pioneer 1200 deck is a professional DJ turntable. And you can only use it if you have vinyl. So the paradigms are shifting back and forth. But because of this new thing that I think is only recently where they're calling it digital fatigue, it is becoming very prevalent because of cell phone technology. Cell phones are getting bigger screen-wise. They're more powerful sometimes than laptops. But the fear is that we don't rely too much, and also to the push by certain governments and NGOs to get the human interaction to come back into societies. That is also going to be an effect on how digital transcends certain aspects of our existence. So I just want to say that is nothing to be feared, but these things do change, and they are changing.
Good morning.
It's still morning.
Yeah. Thanks for having this session. I think it's a very important one. I have a question regarding, and to follow on to what he said about that digital fatigue, I have a question to ask in terms of your research. How have you found the impact of essentially what is really social media addiction on just general productivity, especially where, in a tech-based economy, the skill set requires that people are able to focus and develop certain skills. And the focus generally is that we have to be able to develop certain skills. But everybody is constantly, I guess, fighting against some level of temptation to consume content every waking moment. Well, okay. So I just kind of want to get that, his feedback on that in terms of what his research has revealed in that productivity hit.
Okay, now, in relation to productivity, we also were trying to get someone here from the National Council on Substance Abuse. Unfortunately, because we had a change of times, we had some mix-up in terms of, this panel was originally scheduled for later on in the day, but we had to make some changes. So that unfortunately led to, however, it's been noted that people can spend up to, I believe some people spend up to as much as 20% of their time essentially on social media at work. Now, this is not necessarily, I can't say what the specifics are in relation to Barbados, but there's a distinct impact, obviously, on productivity of the population. Different organizations have started trying to do different things, banning use of cell phones at work, various things in order to try to remove that. But if you have, and I suspect the problem is going to get worse as you have essentially millennials, Generation Y, Generation Z, who come into your organization already, accustomed is a better word than addicted, but come in already almost dependent on social media, then how would you handle that?
It is. Oh, sorry. Oh no, I was just gonna add to the Generation Y, Z, alphabet, whatever. The most businesses now are trending towards realizing that with social media, a lot of their staff spend a lot of time on WhatsApp chatting. So they've built and created internet chat sections so that the people can spend more time with a chat screen on their computer screen. So they're looking at their work and there's a small chat box in the bottom. So as opposed to having to pick up their phone, they can they can chat with people and chat with people at work and whatnot, and still be somewhat productive because you can multicast and have 3 screens and 2 screens and have a little chat box in the bottom and have a running conversation with your colleagues at work, as opposed to trying to manage a person who has a cell phone and trying to get them to be productive at the same time. I'm not sure how successful it is, but it is an attempt to try to not be draconian in telling people you can't use a cell phone at work and they gotta leave a cell phone in their car or something like that. So sorry, Stella.
I was wondering if anybody's heard of things that can be done, because I'm curious about the impact, especially on younger people, in terms of the addiction, and not just the social media, because even Google, the constantly Google, Wikipedia, everything, and the WhatsApp. I'm curious about things like their sleep,
Yes.
impact on their eyes, things we see sometimes when we have like interns at work and stuff, the ability to communicate in full proper English, you know, and then I'm wondering if we've started looking at that in Barbados, and I wonder if you all know of things that people have used overseas to help combat it. And then also, if we've also started talking to Barbados about the loneliness factor, because I know they've acknowledged it in the UK that with the technology comes an increase in loneliness. They already have a loneliness problem, but then in some cases, the technology actually alienates more people. So I'm wondering, what's it like in Barbados? What have we measured so far, and what can we do?
Gentleman wants to make first. Let him speak.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Dev Gosain from the Trinidad and Tobago Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, and I love the topic. My question is really a question for the panel to find out exactly what does research say about this. This lovely young lady here spoke about reading the newspaper on a Sunday. The guy there spoke about, the evolution of the newspaper. How does networks such as Twitter compete? I mean, that style of news reporting. I have 5 minutes to get information. Do I want to spend that 5 minutes reading one article? Or do I want to spend that 5 minutes getting 20 different bits of information? What does the research say about gathered information by various millennials, as my good friend said, the whole alphabet?
Okay, well, I'm not going to forget your question. Actually, let me take. Okay, in relation to people
I just want to say this is a lovely topic here, attention economy. That really struck me, and that's why I asked the question.
In relation to people consuming information, consider how President Trump, his favorite method of disseminating information is Twitter.
180 characters.
People tend to respond better and with greater immediacy to sound bites than to essentially expansive discussions of any given topic. People's attention span has shrunk as people have become more used to the internet and things delivered on the internet and expecting things now. People expect microwavable bites of information. And there are quite a few people who will go on sites like Twitter places like Breitbart, places that have essentially short declarative statements on various things, and they'll prefer that than to read resourced articles that involve context and nuance, because there are a lot of people who themselves are not used to thinking in context and nuance. They just want to hear the world is black and white. So when someone says this is how it is, this is fake news, this is a lie, this is the truth, there's nothing else that they need to hear. Whereas, most of us will want to understand, well, where did this information come from? What is this? How does this relate to anything else? So excuse me, I can't give you specific percentages in terms of millennials prefer X, Y, or Z, but I do know that there is a large section of most populations that tend to respond very positively to essentially sort of short bites of very fixed information.
Right.
So you wanted to take, yeah.
So,
You want,
no problem. I can answer Stella's question first and
Yes.
then let you.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to concur with the sentiments that you expressed just now. We are, I think, approaching a crisis because we're already losing critical thinking skills, and the environment in which we currently operate is exacerbating that. And the environment encourages intellectual indolence. People don't want to take the time to go through expansive bits of information and to assess and weigh relevance and significance, and they don't want to go through that process. And it's a difficult process to begin with.
Yes.
But the environment, and it's changing our brains, how our brains work, and I find this interesting interacting with professionals in different age groups. And I'm surprised sometimes. I find that the majority of younger professionals who are, say, in their 20s, interact in a way that I find interesting. And I think that the distinction between formal and informal correspondence is very easily blurred for them, and they don't necessarily appreciate when they need to sound a certain way. And I think it's because they spend so much time expressing and being informal in shorthand language, in microbial bits of information, that it's a conscious effort for them to be able to operate in a different way. And I remember reading a study some time ago about China and the use of Chinese characters. And there was a concern that young Chinese people did not know how to use more of the traditional characters or even how to write it properly because they're so used to typing. So we really need to be, I think, conscious of ensuring that we have a certain level of intellectual faculty in our communities and countering the environment that we live in now.
Right. Stella, finally. The question you posed regarding to the effects that are being seen locally, I can speak to my mother personally is an educator, my grandfather, all of my teachers were, all my parents and immediate family were educators. I'm just a black sheep in the family. But my mother is writing a book now on the use of English because her fellow workmates and former workmates and HR practitioners and people that are in business today are telling her that young children can't, one, express themselves without being able to say it in 180 characters. Two, they can't even write a proper CV. So they leave secondary school, some of them without the ability, they can do an exam. They can set exams and regurgitate work that was stuffed down their throats for 5 terms, 6 terms. But tell them to expand on that topic, and they falter and fail miserably because they're no longer able to disseminate data back out to you because it's not on a screen. They can't Google it. They can't find the information for me in 15 seconds or less with the 190 hits. They have to immediately, if they don't have that information immediately at their fingertips to give it back to you, then they're lost. So the goal locally is to try to get our young people writing more, reading more, and it is a hard challenge. Hard. You have to get your children away from the phone long enough to get them to read a book. It's so hard. It's not funny.
So are y'all aware? Why I had asked the second part was if y'all are aware of any things in other countries that people have used that work that help to fight these addictions?
Yes, so there are recently, finally, Apple and Google, Android and iOS have recognized that their devices are causing problems, and they are in the process of rolling out controls to help you manage your device instead of having your device manage you. So, for example, you can now enable on an app by app basis whether the app notifies you or not, and what sort of notification you get. So there used to be a time that I would, every time I got a WhatsApp message, I would check my phone. Every time. Every time I got a Facebook message, I would check my phone. I got to the point where I have certain apps that I will turn off I will basically disable notification from them during the workday, or I will set what notifications I get and from who, and others I will just ignore. I'm no longer in a position to allow the app, because I recognized that my cell phone was taking over my life, and I said this can't work. So both Android is built in now into Android 10, which is the latest operating system. They've taken it even further. It's also in iOS, where you also have parental controls, where you can essentially identify this phone belongs to my child, and it gives you the right to control their screen time, their times within certain apps. So we have a lot more control now than we had before, where we had none at all.
But we need that for adults.
We do need it for adults, but the adults themselves need to be able to.
It's self-regulating for adults.
Yes.
So
it's built into the operating
system, so you can do it yourself. You
Right.
just have to recognize
both.
that you are.
Yes, both Apple and Android. To your other point, in relation to loneliness, because I think this is important. Mental health in general. I'm not a mental health professional. Let me start by saying this. So anything I say comes with an asterisk. But I saw there was an artist who he essentially created a series of photos of persons engaged in various activities. And he had them pose in various settings, and then took their phones, told them stay still, and then took their phones away. So there were photos of people around a dinner table, and everyone is like this. Photos of people doing various things. Everyone, it's so stark when you take the phone, when the phone's there, it looks normal. When you take the phone away, suddenly you realize something is very wrong here. Excuse me. We've reached a stage where, from what I recall, suicide and depression among teenage girls in the United States is at an all-time high. The rate of depression all-time high. Where everyone is. Remember, I had mentioned the serotonin. Serotonin is one of the chemicals that your brain releases when you take quite a few drugs. And essentially, when your brain becomes primed to get serotonin hits, it becomes dependent on those serotonin hits to continue feeling happy. So now we have a situation where everyone is putting these photos on social media of them living their best life. Right?
Hashtag outside.
Yeah. Yes. And everyone else is seeing these photos of everyone else living their best life. And now they have FOMO, fear of missing out. So everyone is looking at everyone else and saying, my life is not as good as theirs. And it's essentially a self-perpetuating cycle downwards. So, yeah.
If I can, Stella asked earlier about what we were doing locally, and I remember a few months ago I attended a parent session put on by Eco Nation. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that organization. And they had brought a psychologist. I'm trying to remember the exact title. She wasn't just a psychologist. She was dealing with neuroscience and understanding particularly how games affect our children's brains, etc. It was a very informative, fantastic presentation. It helped me to understand as a parent why when my child starts to play a video game, he's never hungry. And I'm thinking, you must be hungry because, it's been a while. But he really isn't, as far as he's concerned. But she sort of showed me the whole science, or showed us the science behind why that happens. She also went into explaining what you started to talk about earlier in terms of the advertisers using these algorithms to sort of hook not just our children, but to hook us, and how that then translates into money for the big companies, et cetera, et cetera. So that was all very eye-opening. But I know EcoNation has been taking a lot of this information to the schools, the churches, and they've been looking at doing a lot more parent forums, because I think if we understand as parents how that whole thing works behind the scenes, it helps us to help our children. We talk about just limiting children from playing video games and going on these devices, but we think that the limit, we tend to appreciate it more as a punishment or privilege when you can get to go on, as opposed to understanding what it really does to the brain and the whole socialization, etc. In terms of the schools, my children, I have two boys, 20 and 10, is a vast age, but the behavior is the same, interestingly enough. They do their homework with the laptop, the cell phone, the iPad, everything. And this goes back to the work environment and whether or not we can be productive in an office and still be doing these things. What I've found out is that whereas when I was growing up, it was for me to, and even now, for me to really focus in on any type of strategic work, I put my headphones in, but it has to be some sort of study, classical type music, no lyrics to distract me, that sort of thing. I couldn't do it as a child, listen to music, but now that's the norm. We tend to think that there's something wrong with that and there's no way you can concentrate and focus on your work. But they do it. They focus. And I see that there is focus because when I see the end result of their work, I know, well, they have had to be in some sort of actual concentration going on. So we are judging, not let me use the word judge, we are measuring our children or this alpha generation XY productivity by what we know. And it may be somewhat of an error, particularly in the workplace, because we think there is no way you can be focusing on your work if you're doing this, this, and this. And I think that maybe there are, and it's something that we should look at. And in terms of, even in terms of comprehension, we talked about receiving news, Twitter, the bit, that. When my son is doing comprehension, the 10-year-old, he looks at the question and he goes to the passage and he looks for keywords. He doesn't want to read the passage twice like we've been taught. At least read it twice because too much information. So he just wants to pick it out. Like how we do with Twitter, and I keep, trying to stress, you have to read the story, you have to get context, because you're going to reach a stage in your studies where the keyword is not going to be there. You have to use more analytical study skills, etc. So bringing that from the classroom to society, to how we function at work, to how we receive information, to how we understand and appreciate what is fake news, that whole I don't even want to say a movement. It's something we need to look at because it's what's happening. We can push back, I think. Yes. Even as parents, guardians, mentors in the office. Yes. Keep talking. Yes. Not just to our young people, because there's some in our age group who, tend to get lazy. Yes. Just keep talking, just keep reinforcing, and I think that we will start to make incremental steps while the big things are happening on the platforms of the Googles and the etc.
Go ahead.
Okay, continue.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the workplace situation where they're asking the people to look straight at the computer screen instead of the cell phone.
They're trying to encourage them to be more focused on work and not on two different sets of devices.
But what I want to highlight here is the communication, because I know of a company in Barbados, right, that has something they call same time, and people in the office sitting down. I'm sitting at my desk here. Somebody is sitting down at their desk there. On the screen, they're sending a message to them, where they can actually hold over and touch them. So they're not communicating verbally by words. They're communicating by the screen, right? And I think that is something that it helps to not make people being able to communicate and talk to one another.
I know.
Yeah.
Send the mic to him.
Thank you. Thanks. I actually want to address what she just spoke about, which I think was very important, giving the example of the 20 and the 10-year-old and that comprehension thing, because it's very true. And in terms of some of the steps we can take to address it, I think we have to inform our people and make them essentially use that information to take responsibility for how they actually operate in this new environment. I think we need to actually kind of sell the message that you are actually not necessarily in as much control as you think, that there are big, powerful forces that are behind really some of the behaviors that you put down to just how you are. You just check Twitter and all that kind of stuff so many times because you want to, but really and truly, as you're saying, it's a dopamine thing, it's a serotonin thing. The other thing as well is that for me professionally, it has meant being very, very deliberate about certain things. I just can't do my job if I allow my brain to waste away as it can, because I have every convenience in the 21st century at my fingertips. And like the gentleman here said, like many, your phone is by your bed. I like technology, so I tend to invest a lot in it. And what I've found, for example, is that, staring at, they call these retina displays, for example, for hours on end is just horrific for my eyes. So I'm printing more than ever before. The benefit of printing more than ever before is that I am actually less on a screen. And so funny thing is, you're focused more when you're reading. And so a guy talked earlier about going back to vinyl records and that kind of stuff, and I'm in that generation that's actually choosing to print out articles from websites and that kind of stuff to avoid increasing eye strain, which has the knock-on effect of silencing the Slack and silencing the email and silencing the WhatsApp web and everything that otherwise is taking away from your attention. And without doing that, or rather, I can actually now measure the difference between reading a book on a PDF with other things going and deciding to print that thing out in hard copy in terms of the levels of comprehension and analysis and that kind of stuff that can be done later on. The performance impact is actually so great that now it is like if you read it on the screen in a busy day when everything else is at you, you really and truly have to go back at it at some point again to get that same level of comprehension. So I think there's some ownership that we can take.
Yes, there is.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'll do like David and give a little bit of an asterisk to my comments because I wasn't in here for the presenter's earlier comments. So I've heard some of your feedback. My name is Chris. I am a social media manager. I have a company that does social media for corporate regional clients. And the first thing that I must say, I'm struck by how much doom and gloom there is in this room around social media, and it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere, and the phone is not going anywhere either. So we have to adapt, and I think that's my first comment on that, and I want to speak to what was spoken about in terms of the corporate environment. I have to deal with corporate a lot, and what I have found is that there is somewhat of a shift within the corporate environment because the challenge of doing social media is the ability to constantly be producing content. And what you find happens, persons like myself, I advise the companies and say, look, I can't always be there, but you are. And you can document, that's what we really call it, you can document what's going on in your business. So I have seen a shift where managers are more accepting of their staff documenting what's going on within their space. But interestingly enough, in the course of that process, a lot of companies do not have social media guidelines at all, whatsoever. And if you bring it up, they don't even have any clue where to start, how much time should they be on there and so on. So I think to build on that, I think that as much as there are real issues around depression and loneliness and so on, but how do we as a society within this region manage the technology? And there's a lot of interesting stuff out there that is going on. For example, there are restaurants where you put your cell phone in a basket for the time that you're engaging in your meal. There are things like that we can pick up on that are low cost, that can change and help with the culture. I want to speak to education as well. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she's mandated to use Google Classroom. And I have struggled with that because she has her iPhone and she has to use Google Classroom, and I'm not sure, is she on Google Classroom right now or is she on WhatsApp right now? And I can't take away that phone because she gets homework on it every single day. And I am the parent and I'm a tech person and I am struggling as to how to manage this situation.
Dark place in life.
Sorry?
I said that's a dark place in life. You can't. You are stuck not being able to regulate your child's use of a cell phone because her school gives her homework via a device that you can't take away.
Because
you understand where we are at.
And I used to punish her by taking away her phone, and now I can't anymore.
But that is why, as I mentioned earlier, the smartphone, not manufacturers, the smartphone operating system providers, so specifically Google and Apple, are building granular controls now into the smartphone for parents so that you can say, during this time, the only thing on your phone that works It's Google Classroom.
Yes, and I absolutely take that point. But just stepping outside of my tech space now, as a parent, the school did not give me any resources or any commentary or anything to support me as to this is what you can do or this is going to be the issue. And so those are the types of things which I think we as a society, as this technology develops, we have to engage the population on. Thank you.
I guess we're about to finish and wrap up. So, in closing, we should always all remember that technology is an essential man-made tool, and abusive. Gunpowder was a tool. Dynamite was a tool. All man-made guns were first designed as weapons to hunt for food. They were all misused and turned into something bad. And Google was developed as a tool, and it's being misused. And it's self-regulation and us that have to realize that we got to use these tools for betterment and not for what the status quo currently maintains. I see we have 1 minute left, so we can let David finish.
Okay. No, I mean, basically we've essentially, mankind's crossed the line that we're not going back across. It's like once we created fire and learned how to cook, we were not going back to eating raw meat. So it's the same thing, right? So it's a matter of having created the tools, we have to work out how best to use the tools for our benefit and not allow the tools to use us. And we are growing closer and closer to the point where the tools have the ability to use us. So we need to make sure that we are responsible in how we use these tools that we have. And the last thing I would like to say is you have the app. Please go in and rate the session because we need your feedback. And thank you very much for your time and your participation. Yeah, and attention, yes. We can sell that somewhere. Thank you.